ladies and gentlemen, IoT for startups.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for the introduction and thank you for being here at the first time at the TechBBQ in Copenhagen. My name is Christian. I'm the founder and CEO of the Wearable Technologies Group and of the Innovation World Cup Series. I want to give you a very brief overview about what we are doing, and then we will have a sophisticated panel here about the challenges if you want to create an IoT business and if you want to create an IoT product. So, what we are doing is we are looking worldwide about the best IoT solutions in the world, and we have different categories. And if you have a product at the moment, you want to take part in our competition, the competition is free of charge. You just have to apply, and at least in one of these categories, you could win prizes of more than 500,000 euros. We have some special prizes, and these special prizes are very interesting because if you look here at the topic of BIM, for example, if you are at the moment in the developing of sensor technologies, don't think only about consumer electronics, healthcare, or other markets which are normal like industrial applications or transport applications. Look in the construction business. The construction business is heavily involved at the moment in the digitalization process, and you could realize here tremendous, interesting business opportunities. We have an own prize, EBV IoT Hero Prize. It's a 10,000 euro prize you can win if you take part in that award. And we have an award for smart closing. We have an award about trusted connectivity from Gemalto. And we have a dedicated LoRaWAN award. Look in these technologies like LoRa. It's an amazing topic. Narrowband technologies are one of the solutions where you could create direct connected devices, sensors directly connected to the cloud. The interesting topic is if you want to develop a product, you can get free of charge software development kits from our partners, ST Microelectronics, for example, or from Gemalto, or from EBV. And we have a huge track record since the last years. I want to mention here Sigfox, for example. They were a finalist 5 years ago. Today they are a billion valued company based out of France. Or we have here GateUp, they were bought by MindMaze, or we have Kobi, they were just recently bought by Bosch. So a lot of track record where companies were purchased or which did very interesting funding rounds. But now I want to talk really about the hard stuff. I want to talk with experts about the technology, about the business opportunities which are there and how you could overcome the barriers you have if you want to create a hardware device. And then first, I want to invite now on the panel Benjamin Joffe. He is a partner of HEX. HEX is the world's most active investor in hardware startups. They have a 400 million fund for investing into IoT, robotic, and consumer and health tech startups. And Benjamin is a guest writer for Forbes. He has published articles in TechCrunch, in VentureBeat, and Nature and Wall Street Journal, and in Wired. So please welcome now Benjamin on the stage for our discussion roundtable. The next one is coming from, we could not say it's a startup anymore, but at least it's felt in the category of startup, Bragi. They were also a finalist of our Innovation World Cup series many years ago. And they are still the most successful crowd-funded company in Europe. And Drago, he is at the moment he's the executive vice president at Bragi, and he was working in different categories of international business. For example, at Intel, at 3D Fix, at Interactive, and at Casio. So please welcome now Darko on the stage from the company Bragi, sorry. And then we have Werner Wolfert. He is responsible for new customer development at ABB Electronic. Werner is a manager with 20 years of experience in the electronic industry and distribution business.
Like a water.
And since 2014, he is in charge of ABB Electronics customer development and especially for the Start Me Up program, but about that he will tell us more later. So Werner, please come on the stage. That was now a very fast introduction about my panelists here on the stage. But perhaps we start with Benjamin. I mean, Benjamin, you saw in the past so many hardware-oriented startups. What is the most difference between all these more web-oriented, internet-oriented startups and the hardware startups you are helping with your fund and with your acceleration program? Perhaps you could explain a bit about the acceleration program and about the barriers for these companies.
Sure. First, pleasure to be here in Denmark, and first time here. Over the past 6 years, we've invested in about 200 hardware startups, and we probably saw, I don't know, 5,000 or more startups. So we've seen a lot of projects, and probably the key difference between hardware and software, I mean, it's pretty obvious that you need to deal with atoms. That means that you need not only to prototype, which is generally slower with hardware than software, and you need to build a supply chain, you need to build distribution. So there's a lot more complexity in getting a product to market, in also the variety of skills that you need to do that. When you do software, you don't need somebody taking care of logistics, for instance. You have less problem with managing and financing inventory. So our approach has been to find how technical founders who typically have a core technology could bring it to market faster and also saving time and saving money. And to do that, we built a support program in Shenzhen, in China, south of China, where there's basically the Hollywood for electronics. That's where pretty much every piece of electronics is made. Not all of them, but quite a lot. There we have a team that helps founders acquire the skills necessary to actually prototype faster, engage with the supply chain, and then learn about the marketing, PR, fundraising, all they need. And then we have another office in San Francisco that helps with the later stages for distribution and fundraising.
You mentioned, so in your Vita was mentioned that you're also in the healthcare area. Could you explain a bit the big difference between creating a hardware in the consumer electronic business and creating a hardware in the healthcare business?
Yeah, I mean, the simple difference is certifications. So if you do anything that has medical claims, you need to go through approval by FDA, for instance, Food and Drug Administration in the US, which typically requires clinical trials. I was just talking with one of our portfolio company over here who does fertility testing for men. And their big challenge has been to actually validate the technologies through clinical trials. And funny enough, it's a French company. And in France, they spent a year trying to find a partner to actually do that. And didn't really work out. Like the clinics were very conservative. And they decided to explore the Nordics. And they just opened an office in Malmo. And in 3 months, they found a clinical trial partner. So just kind of quick example of how the difficulties inherent to health tech. Health is really interesting because we're made of atoms, and at the moment, most of the medicine is very reactive, is dealing with symptoms and trying to cure symptoms, and then looking at the causes. But the future in health tech is really about something preventive, something participatory, where you share your data, and that improves everything. And that's really the future.
Yeah, but the clinical trials you have to do and all these things are very expensive, and therefore you have to have much more funding than for
It depends.
For other
the
products,
cost varies. In some cases, you can find good partners who are actually really interested in doing that research that can co-finance, or you can. It's not necessarily a problem of cost. It's a problem of time. It's a problem of finding the right partners, finding the right test subjects. And for example, this fertility company told me that they had really a lot of trouble finding the fertility data. They ended up buying from basically Southern Europe some data to be able to have to get started. But that's another issue.
Let's move to Dargo, because I mean, could you explain us a bit what kind of product you have? Perhaps 80% of the people know Bragi. You know Bragi? I see. Please raise a hand. So
I know Bragi.
It's not 80, it's 50. But I think it's good to explain the product and to showcase also how the different steps were in the development of your product in the last, let's say, 5 years. I mean, the company is just 5 years old, right?
Yeah, the company has been founded 5 years ago, but let's say the idea and concept has started a bit earlier. Well, in fact, it's a quite complex approach over time, because we started with hardware, running some software, but visible visibly, it was a consumer electronics product, which was kind of used to develop a software platform upon and create a huge proof of concept with 200,000 pieces installed base. And now we are launching on top a software product and solutions part. And having this in mind from the beginning, of course, is a quite complex venture where you also need some openness in the direction over time, not knowing how the market will react, what kind of partners you will find, how the funding will go. But yeah, it's important to, let's say, at least have a clear vision and then have some flexibility on the path.
I mean, I know your founder also quite well, and I would kill myself, I think, 2 times already if I'm the founder of Bragi, because if I look at the newspaper and see what Samsung is doing, what Apple is doing, it's so hard, and you're still alive and you're doing good, and this is amazing, I think, as a startup which is targeting exactly the same market, and you created the market. So Bragi was the first one who did an in-earphone system, earphone system with vital data tracking wirelessly, right? You were the first one.
Well, we claimed to make the world's first hearable. So, in fact, there was a time advantage and a lot of followers. Well, in Asia, I think according to Confucius, he said, honor your master by copying him. So we feel honored. On the other side, it's a business and we need to survive and be profitable. And in that sense, of course, it's tough if some big gorillas are joining in the arena as well. And that's why, as well, we have had always in mind the software play and the kind of second step and bigger picture.
So the software play is at least a protection of your IP and the protection of your hardware product, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so coming to this gentleman, Werner, you were involved very early in the development of that product, right?
Yes, yes.
How was the first contact to the startup? Perhaps you know that. And what was the major barrier for you as a corporate? I mean, you're representing a €3 billion revenue company.
Yeah, we as a corporate have the barrier to work with a startup that they have a new technology. Yeah, they are very innovative, but you do not have any history about this project. Yeah, but we are very open-minded on that. Yeah. And then we have our specialists in-house with our directors of our segments, and especially our IoT wearable segment director was deeply invited in this development of this project. Yeah.
But to evaluate such a project, to find out that this is the right person, the right founder, I could rely on him, I could invest at least my engineering power a bit into that startup. How do you evaluate that? I mean, perhaps Benjamin has also an idea, but perhaps you, Werner.
Yeah, it's a very difficult scouting process from this new project, from this new company. It's a lot of trust in this, and then you have to look at the team. Are these the correct peoples in place? Yeah, is the financial situation, is that clear? Yeah, and also if it is a product that the market needs and the market it is a must-have product. Yeah. And not a nice-to-have product.
Okay, unique was the financial situation.
Yeah,
I mean, the good thing was they had raised so much over Kickstarter. How much did you raise over Kickstarter?
$3.4 million at that time.
So there was some money for also engineering, but I think there are many companies which have not the luck to be in Kickstarter, to get in Kickstarter 3.4 and have perhaps also a good product idea. How you handle that, Benjamin?
Yeah, absolutely. Kickstarter is for consumer startups, and we used to have a lot in the first few years of Hacks. Our startups have run over 100 campaigns. None of them have reached the same number, but we had about a dozen, like $1 million+ dollars. But what's interesting in what was being said here is that, so when you can't raise from crowdfunding, but also in any case, when you're looking for manufacturing partners, when you're a startup, you're not really a good business for most manufacturers or most distribution partners. So they're essentially making an investment on you. The same way that like a record label would pick an artist, say, okay, let's try to do a single. Or the same way a gallery would say, okay, this artist looks interesting, and let's try to do a little show. And then if it goes well, we'll sign them up. So manufacturing partners also make an investment in resources because initially you're a really small business. You're actually quite a bit of trouble because you don't know what you're doing when you're a small startup, generally. And what's interesting is that we see that in the past few years, the supply chain, particularly in China, has opened up a lot for startups because you have all those manufacturing companies that are competing, doing commoditized stuff, and they realize that the margins are becoming really small, they're becoming gradually irrelevant or undifferentiated, so they're making bets on startups, very much like investors, hoping that 1 maybe out of 10 is going to grow to be a large business, because they heard about the successes of Beats, the successes of Fitbit, those early stage consumer startups, and they hope that with you, they're going to grow a business, they're going to learn something useful, they're going to improve their capabilities. But the mindset has really changed also on the manufacturing and the supply chain side.
And therefore they take shares, or therefore they take some higher
No,
margin
and
or
that's
more
what's
commission?
wonderful, is that typically they don't invest money. They accept to work with you. And remember, when you're like 3 people with no skills or just technical skills, you have no idea what's going on the factory line, they're going to spend a lot of time educating you on fixing problems that people who know what they're doing avoid. So it's an investment in resources. They don't take equity, they're generally not interested. In some cases they are, but it's quite rare. It's more about thinking you're going to be good business and you're going to be good learning partner. And we see that happen more and more. And I think that's really interesting development for hardware startups.
Okay, because I think there's a problem for them. Perhaps they support the startup. The bigger EMS house supports the startup, the electronic manufacturing service company supports the startup, and then the startup went well, and they produced the first 5,000 pieces with this one, and then the next 50,000 are produced with a competitor. I think this is a
not
bit the
impossible.
topic. This is a bit like in the music industry, is a label then, right? So
That's
you
not
have to sign
impossible.
something where you have to agree for the next 3 years to manufacture with those guys, or
I think it's the reality, the way the supply chain is layered. So Apple works with tier 1 suppliers like the Foxconn of the world. There's actually just one. And then you have the tier 2, who have like 500,000 employees or more. But as a small startup, generally, you can only engage with tier 4, tier 3, tier 4, smaller factories. And if you scale up, you might want to find partners that have better capabilities. So actually, I'm kind of curious how you guys manage your supply chain, on who do you decide to work with, and whether that changed over time. Because you ship lots of units, right?
Yeah, well, we were lucky, or the founder was lucky when setting together the management team, and we had some experienced people from now a competitor who did this for many years before and had all the network, so they could jumpstart easily on that part. But as you said, one risk is that you move onwards when the volume rises. The other risk is as well that your manufacturer learns with you, and then
how could you protect that? So I mean, you have that topic, I think, several times.
Several times, and that's correct. And our experience is that you need a partner for sampling process, for the pre-series, for smaller volume, but for the high volume you need to look for another partner. Yeah? So this is what we did, the experience in the past, that if you do a business plan, then you have to have the plan in place for the quantities for the 1 up to 3 years, and then after the volume production. Yeah?
And what is a quantity? So perhaps I think that could be also interesting for the audience. So what is a small quantity in that world of hardware, and what is a normal quantity?
Small quantities is around 10 to up to 50,000 pieces, and the high volume quantity is more than 500,000 units. Yeah?
And then you're becoming slowly a real customer.
Really,
Before you are at least no customer.
Right.
And that is also new, I think.
And if you're talking about a tier 1, then you have quantities higher than 1 million. Yeah.
I think the quantity also depends what kind of business you're in. So in the past few years, we've done a lot of investments in service robots. And when you start with a robot, you start with one. Yeah. So you need a lot of custom parts. Price is a little bit of a concern, but not that much, because you're trying to deliver a service that has much more value than the price of the product. So for instance, we have one company called Simbi Robotics. They created a robot that goes around the alleys in supermarkets and they scan, they basically take pictures of all the products on the shelves, and they recognize each product, and then they can help you manage the inventory in the store. Because normally this is done by people going around with tablets or paper, and that takes a really long time. And now the robot can do it in 30 minutes instead of 30 hours. So when they started, they had just one robot in one store for a pilot, and then it worked well, and then they're building more robots. And this is, they're not actually selling a robot, they're selling the service. So it really, like, the supply chain has to be kind of adapted to what you're doing. And we have other, interestingly, actually, many of our startups build kind of their own supply chain, because if you delegate it to some third party for management, the image I like is that it's almost like, when you're making a product nobody has ever made, it's almost like you're trying to cook a new dish, and imagine you're not in the kitchen and you're just phoning somebody in the kitchen asking if it's too salty or too sweet, or if it's too hot or anything. Like, you can't really work this way. You need to be next to the tools, and one mistake that a lot of hardware startups make is that they don't spend enough time on the factory line working with their partners.
But if you come into this topic of hardware as a service, or let's say the service is king and the hardware is the delivery part, the software is the main part, and this is the reason perhaps why Bragi now invested in this cloud system and the new software release. Could you explain a bit more what you are doing there? So it's an interoperable IoT connection platform you're creating, or what is it?
Well, basically we believe that everything will compute at some point in time, and the cloud is still remaining, but it can't communicate with everything if we have tens of billion connected devices. So what we have developed is an edge computing platform which runs on very little power, on really little computational frames, and which can be deployed more or less anywhere, and still create contextual information.
Okay.
And the use case on the dash was that it detects if you're running or cycling or swimming. It automatically starts your activity, counts your strokes, your cadence. You don't need to touch any app or start anything or even say to start. The things happen by itself. And imagine, let's say you have sensors in the bicycle or in other things.
I mean, edge computing is a big topic at least, but the question is, do I need then a dedicated ARM processor in my hardware, or what kind of infrastructure do I need in this edge device?
Yeah, we say that we are hardware, network, and software agnostic. So the solution could be embedded in anything. So it could run from a microcontroller or ARM M0 type up to virtually in the cloud or on a smartphone, and can connect more or less up to 32,000 nodes to create a mesh system.
So it's a kind of dust then, yeah?
At some point, perhaps, yes.
Where we are coming closer. Yeah. How do you handle that in your development? I mean, you have a lot of software engineers and hardware engineers who are doing at least design in for companies, for startups, but also for normal enterprises. So I have learned in the past, let's say 15 years, that embedded software programming is still a lag in the industry. So we have a lot of people who are brilliant trained in doing PHP, whatever, and applications in the cloud. And we have some who are good in the pure machine programming. But they are not working very close to each other. And in the middle, we still have a lag. Is it still that we have a lack of engineers in that field? So in this, let's say, embedded software programming?
I believe yes.
Yeah, still? Is it also your...
I think so, yes.
And how could we overcome that, Benjamin?
Train more people. Well, it's true. Like in hardware, you need a mix of skills. You need software skills, you need electronics, you need mechanical, you need firmware people, and you need people who have a vision of the systems. And particularly when you start to do like mobile robots, for example, for whatever application, this skill set is actually quite rare. So yeah, I mean, what other solution than to train more people? Please study robotics.
We have 4 minutes to go. I ask, do we have some questions? Okay, so we have one question from the auditorium. Perhaps it's a question we can talk now 4 minutes about. Otherwise, I have several other questions. So, what is the largest challenge in bringing IoT products to market compared to regular hardware products? So the example between IoT and hardware. So what is a normal hardware product? This is now a big question. I mean, in the future, all hardware products will be IoT products, right?
That's right. But if we say the standard hardware is not connected, it takes one critical dimension. Is what I think is the challenge today are the missing standards and the evolvement of the IoT in general. So you can connect with Zigbee, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all kind of stuff, and to consider all possibilities in a product is a challenge for sure.
Yes, I mean the RF protocols are different, but the RF protocols in that dedicated segment are all quite interoperable. But the problem is, I think it's more the layer above, how to streamline their data process, that the people could really have their own private cloud and store in that private cloud the different sensor informations from the different devices that we have, or in the industrial field the same, right? So I think a modulation of the data which is coming out of the sensor, this is something where we have a missing link. Some companies are working on that, but I think there's for sure no standard out there.
Yeah, the standard is needed, or a common standard that the selection is, it is very huge, as Darko say, and this is I think this is a very big competition.
Okay.
For the hardware.
Last question to Benjamin. What was in the last 12 months the most exciting product you saw, which you could share with us, where you have invested already, so you are safe?
Okay. So product we haven't invested in.
You haven't invested in, okay.
No,
it was a question more. You have invested in, and you say, okay, it's the most exciting one you saw in the last 12 months. So you are safe on that side.
Okay. I'll quote one that's from the Nordics. It's kind of interesting product. It's a company called Flow Neuroscience. And what they do is a device that does brain stimulation to help treat depression. And basically, they're going to compete with antidepressants. So this company is based in Sweden. They raised a couple of million, including from Khosla Ventures in the US. And I think this is really an interesting example of two things. First, where you see electronic products with good software and neuroscience and like behavioral therapy also embedded start to compete with basically big pharma. So you have electronics competing with pharmaceuticals. It's not in the wearable, it's not a wearable category thing. It's depression treatment. So that's one thing. And
one product, because I also want to ask Darko about one product.
The most exciting
beside Bragi.
Beside Bragi, the last 12 months. Well, that's a good question. If I may, I would answer after and just think about it.
Okay. So,
my favorite product is a smart lamp from Austria. Is from Luke Roberts.
Yeah.
It is a smart lamp which everybody can use at home. And this is for me. I have also bought such a lamp, and this is for me is my favorite product.
And what is the uniqueness? So compared to Hui from
you
Philips?
you can paint your light in the room. Yeah, you have an app. You can paint there your light where you what color you will have, and this really a smart application. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As Darko had no product, so I will tell you my favorite product. It's from Proteus Medical from San Francisco. It's an intelligent pill. It's with an organic electronic on top of the pill. You eat the pill, and now the stomach fluid in your stomach is reacting with the pill and is generating some very small energy. And the energy is transmitted via our RFID protocol to an intelligent patch on your stomach, and it's detecting every pill you eat. That means medication is detected one-to-one, and it's for Alzheimer patients, and they have already FDA. There's no vision. The product is there. They are selling the product. And there we are already, if we are talking about medical, if you're talking about connected healthcare products. So thank you so much. We have to stop. We are directly in time. Brilliant. Thanks so much. Give hands, please, to the audience, to our panel and to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.